Tim Cook's story begins in the quiet town of Robertsdale, Alabama, where life moved slowly and values ran deep. He grew up in a modest home with simple routines, church on Sundays, family meals at the table, and long drives through quiet southern roads. His father worked at a shipyard, and his mother at a pharmacy, both modeling the dignity of hard work without complaint. They taught Tim that character mattered more than circumstance, and that kindness was something you carried everywhere. These early lessons shaped him long before he stepped into the world of technology. As a child, Tim was calm, observant, and thoughtful. He wasn't the loudest or the most outgoing, but he had a strong inner steadiness that made people trust him. He preferred listening over speaking, studying the world patiently rather than rushing through it. In school, he excelled quietly, focusing on understanding rather than showing off. Friends often remembered him as the person who solved problems without drawing attention, a quality that would define his leadership decades later. The town around Tim exposed him early to issues of fairness and empathy. Growing up in the American South, he witnessed moments of injustice that never left him. These experiences shaped his belief that leadership should include courage, the courage to stand up for others, even when it's not easy. Tim carried these values carefully, letting them shape his future rather than harden his heart. They planted the seed of the moral clarity he would later bring to one of the world's largest companies. By his teenage years, Tim had developed a strong sense of discipline. He woke up early, balanced schoolwork with part-time jobs, and treated responsibilities with seriousness beyond his age. While others chased excitement, Tim gravitated toward structure. He found comfort in routines, efficiency, and doing things the right way the first time. This calm, methodical mindset became one of his greatest strengths. When he entered college, Tim chose industrial engineering, a field built on precision, logic, and optimizing systems. He attended Auburn University, where he continued to excel quietly. He wasn't seeking awards or recognition. He simply enjoyed understanding how things worked and how to make them better. During long nights in labs and libraries, Tim learned to analyze problems with clarity and patience. His professors admired his steady dedication, describing him as the student who never rushed but always delivered. At Auburn, Tim discovered something important about himself. He wasn't just good with numbers or systems. He had the rare ability to see the entire flow of a process, from raw material to finished product, and understand how each decision affected the whole. This skill would later become the backbone of Apple's global success. For Tim, engineering wasn't just a career. It was a lens through which he made sense of the world. After graduating, Tim stepped into the beginning of his professional journey, carrying with him the values and discipline shaped by his childhood. He didn't yet know the path ahead, but he knew how to approach it, with patience, integrity, and quiet determination. The world was much larger than Robertsdale, but the lessons he learned there would guide every step he took. And though he didn't realize it at the time, he was slowly moving toward a role that no one could have predicted. Life would soon take Tim far beyond the small town where he grew up. But the calm strength he developed in his early years would remain his constant anchor, through challenges, transformations, and responsibilities that would one day touch the entire world. For now, he was just beginning the journey that would eventually lead him to one of the most influential positions in modern history. After graduating from Auburn University, Tim Cook stepped into the professional world with the steady confidence of someone who understood his own strengths. His first major role was at IBM, where he began learning the complexities of large-scale operations. The environment was fast, demanding, and highly technical, but Tim approached it with calm precision. He wasn't interested in rushing toward promotion. He was focused on mastering the details that others overlooked. Over the years, he gained a reputation for being reliable, thoughtful, and remarkably consistent. At IBM, Tim discovered that operational excellence wasn't just about efficiency, it was about understanding people. He managed factories, supply chains, and global teams, observing how even small improvements could create massive impact. Tim learned that leadership didn't always require being the loudest voice in the room. Instead, it required clarity, empathy, and the ability to ask the right questions. His colleagues admired his steadiness, often turning to him when things were uncertain or chaotic. As his responsibilities grew, Tim began looking beyond immediate results and toward long-term strategy. He became known for identifying weaknesses in systems and transforming them into strengths. Whether working with manufacturing teams or overseeing logistics, he never lost sight of the bigger picture. He believed that the way a company produced its products was just as important as the products themselves. This belief laid the groundwork for the operational genius he would later bring to Apple. After nearly 12 years at IBM, Tim took a role at Intelligent Electronics, where he led the company's materials and distribution operations. This opportunity allowed him to apply everything he had learned about supply chain management on a broader scale. Tim streamlined processes, reduced inefficiencies, and helped the company adapt to rapid industry changes. His calm leadership earned him respect across the organization. He didn't need applause or recognition. He let his results speak clearly. In 1997, Tim made a surprising move to Compaq, one of the world's largest computer manufacturers at the time. It was a prestigious position with a stable future. Most people would have stayed for years, content with the security it provided, but Tim felt something missing. While the company produced popular devices, he struggled to find a deeper sense of purpose. He wanted to work somewhere where values, vision, and innovation aligned naturally. He didn't yet know what that place was, but he knew it wasn't Compaq. Everything changed when Tim received a call from Apple. At the time, Apple was struggling. Its market share was low, its operations were inefficient, and many believed the company was nearing its end. Tim was hesitant. Joining a company in trouble meant embracing uncertainty, potential failure, and significant risk. But then he met Steve Jobs. Their conversation wasn't filled with corporate jargon or empty promises. Instead, Steve spoke about vision, creativity, and changing the world through technology. Tim felt something shift within him during that conversation. He realized that purpose mattered more than stability. Apple wasn't offering him a comfortable job, it was offering him the chance to build something meaningful. Against the advice of many around him, Tim made the decision to join Apple. It was a choice driven not by logic alone, but by a deeper instinct that aligned with his values. He believed that doing the right work was more important than choosing the safest path. When Tim arrived at Apple in 1998, he found a company filled with talent but weighed down by disorganization. Factories were costly, inventories were unpredictable, and operations were spread too thin. But Tim didn't panic or rush into sweeping changes. He observed quietly, asked questions, and studied the entire system piece by piece. He understood that solving Apple's problems required precision, not pressure. Within weeks, he began forming a plan that would transform the company from the inside out. Tim streamlined Apple's manufacturing process, closed inefficient facilities, and formed strategic partnerships with suppliers around the world. He consolidated operations, reduced waste, and built one of the most advanced supply chains the industry had ever seen. His approach was calm, disciplined, and deeply thoughtful. He didn't seek attention for his decisions, but his impact was unmistakable. Apple became leaner, faster, and more resilient, ready for the next era of innovation. Through this period, Tim worked closely with Steve Jobs, complementing his visionary creativity with grounded execution. Together, they formed a rare balance. Steve focused on the future, while Tim ensured the company could bring that future to life. Tim often said that he learned more from Steve than from anyone else he had ever worked with. Their partnership wasn't based on similarity, but on respect for their differences. And as Apple entered the 2000s, their combined strengths would prepare the company for extraordinary transformation. As Apple entered the early 2000s, the company was preparing for a wave of innovation that would redefine modern technology. Products like the iMac, iPod, and later the iPhone were reshaping the industry, but behind the scenes, Tim Cook was making sure everything worked with precision. He oversaw production, logistics, and global operations, ensuring that Apple could deliver products at the scale their growing demand required. Tim didn't seek the spotlight. He focused on building a foundation strong enough to support the company's creativity. His calm leadership allowed Apple to grow without losing stability. Many people inside Apple quietly recognized that Tim had become the steady hand guiding the company's internal heartbeat. While Steve Jobs pushed for bold innovation, Tim ensured the organization could execute flawlessly. He believed that excellence came from discipline. Every detail mattered. Every process had purpose. Under Tim's guidance, Apple's efficiency reached levels that competitors struggled to match. His work made it possible for Apple to move quickly without sacrificing quality. The relationship between Steve and Tim was built on deep mutual respect. They approached the world differently, but they shared a belief in building products that changed people's lives. Steve admired Tim's ability to remain calm under pressure, while Tim admired Steve's visionary courage. Together they formed a partnership that balanced imagination with execution. Tim often described Steve not just as a mentor, but as a leader who challenged him to grow in ways he never expected. As Apple continued to rise, Tim took on more responsibilities, eventually becoming Chief Operating Officer. He handled challenges quietly, supplier conflicts, production setbacks, and global disruptions. In moments when Apple faced uncertainty, Tim stepped in with clarity. His ability to stay level-headed allowed the company to navigate storms without losing direction. Tim believed that leadership wasn't about avoiding difficulty. It was about facing it with steady intention. Everything changed in 2011 when Steve Jobs stepped down as CEO due to health challenges. The announcement shook the tech world, and many wondered who could possibly guide Apple after Steve. Steve had one answer: Tim Cook. He believed Tim was the right person, not because he would replicate him, but because he would lead with his own strengths. Tim accepted the responsibility with humility and a deep sense of duty. He knew the world would compare him to Steve, but he also knew he had to stay true to who he was. Stepping into the role of CEO was an emotional moment for Tim. He carried not only the weight of the company, but the legacy of a friend and mentor. He understood the expectations, the pressure, and the enormous responsibility ahead. Yet Tim approached his new role as he approached every challenge in life, calmly, thoughtfully, and with unwavering focus. He wasn't trying to become the next Steve Jobs. He was trying to become the best version of himself. Tim knew that Apple didn't need another visionary in the same shape as Steve. It needed a leader who could protect the company's values while guiding it through a new era. He spent his early months as CEO listening deeply to teams, understanding what they needed, and honoring the culture Steve helped build. At the same time, he began making subtle changes, strengthening Apple's commitment to privacy, sustainability, and human rights. These principles reflected his own values, shaped by the lessons of his childhood in Alabama. During the transition, Tim leaned on something he had carried with him his entire life: empathy. He believed that leadership wasn't only about strategy, it was also about people. He made decisions with compassion, communicated clearly during difficult times, and reminded employees that Apple's purpose was bigger than profit. This approach created a culture of trust during a moment when uncertainty could have shaken the entire company. In the years that followed, Tim quietly proved that his leadership was not just capable, but exceptional. Under his guidance, Apple expanded into new markets, introduced the Apple Watch, launched new services, and refined its commitment to security and user privacy. He brought stability and steady growth, even as the tech world evolved rapidly. Through every challenge, Tim remained grounded, letting calmness guide his choices. He knew that leadership was not about noise, it was about clarity. As Apple adapted to a changing world, Tim carried forward the foundation he helped build from the beginning. The company didn't just grow, it matured. Tim believed deeply that innovation must be guided by responsibility, and that the true measure of success was the impact a company had on people's lives. His journey from a small town in Alabama to leading one of the world's most influential companies reflected a simple truth. Quiet strength can move the world just as powerfully as bold ambition. As Apple moved into a new decade, Tim Cook continued leading with the same calm steadiness that had guided him from the beginning. His focus was not only on products, but on people, customers, employees, and the global communities touched by Apple's work. He believed technology should be built with humanity in mind, not just innovation. Under his leadership, Apple invested deeply in renewable energy, environmental responsibility, and ethical supply chains. Tim understood that progress meant caring for the world you helped shape. Privacy became one of Tim's core pillars. While other tech companies pushed aggressively toward data collection, Tim took a different path. He insisted that privacy was a fundamental human right, not a feature to be bargained with. Apple's products were designed to protect users, even when it made development more challenging. Tim believed that the best technology was the kind that empowered people without compromising their dignity. This philosophy became a defining mark of Apple's identity under his leadership. As CEO, Tim introduced a quieter kind of innovation, one built on precision, refinement, and long-term thinking. He prioritized health, accessibility, and the connection between technology and well-being. Products like the Apple Watch weren't just devices, they became tools that helped save lives, monitor health, and support people in meaningful ways. Tim's calm approach to product development reflected his belief that the greatest impact often comes from thoughtful, practical improvements rather than dramatic breakthroughs. During times of global difficulty, Tim became a steady voice offering clarity and support. Whether navigating economic uncertainty or responding to world events, he communicated with empathy and transparency. Employees described him as someone who always made time to listen, even when his schedule was packed. Tim believed that leadership was about service, being present, compassionate, and responsible. These qualities made Apple not just stronger, but more human. Despite leading one of the world's largest and most scrutinized companies, Tim remained remarkably grounded. He valued simplicity, routine, and personal discipline. He started most mornings with a workout, found calm in quiet reflection, and stayed deeply connected to the work happening at every level of Apple. His humility never faded, even as Apple grew into the most valuable company on the planet. Tim believed that success was temporary unless it was earned every day. As Apple continued to evolve, Tim helped shape its presence far beyond technology. He championed diversity and inclusion, pushing for equal opportunities and representation across the company. He advocated for LGBTQ+ rights, environmental protection, and education initiatives around the world. These efforts weren't driven by publicity, they came from values he carried since childhood. He believed that companies had a responsibility to move the world forward, not just profit from it. Looking back on his journey, Tim often reflected on the unexpected path that brought him to Apple. He once described joining the company as the best decision he ever made, not because it led to success, but because it aligned with his purpose. He didn't chase fame or recognition, he chased meaning. His story became a reminder that the quietest voices can create the strongest impact, and that integrity remains powerful even in a world driven by speed. Tim Cook's legacy isn't defined by a single invention or moment. It's defined by consistency, the long, steady work of building a company that stays true to its values while shaping the future. His leadership shows that you don't need to be loud to lead. You don't need to be forceful to inspire, and you don't need to follow someone else's path to make a difference. You can lead gently, think clearly, and move with purpose. As this documentary comes to a close, let Tim's journey remind you of the power of calm determination. You don't have to rush to achieve something meaningful. You don't have to mimic others to create your own impact. Like Tim, you can move through life with patience, kindness, and quiet confidence, trusting that each thoughtful step contributes to a larger purpose.